Hi, everyone. Wanted to spend a little bit of time, short period of time, talking about the departures at Manchester City, a conversation that has been had for the last week, in particular about Bernardo Silva, John Stones, and of course, maybe most notably Pep Guardiola, who ranks among the elite managers in the history of the Premier League after kind of an auspicious start. And I'll admit, I was someone who, as probably a much more day-to-day Manchester City supporter in 2016 than I am in 2026, I was concerned about Guardiola bringing his brand of football into England, and how would it work? How would it work, particularly with a side that had, I felt, been fairly successful under Roberto Mancini and Manuel Pellegrini. And under Mancini, there was a defensive solidity that allowed City to win that title in the 11-12 season under the most crazy of circumstances, right? In stoppage time with the Aguero goal against QPR, or QPR, as I like to say, kind of mocking the West London Shepherd's Bush accent with that. But after that QPR win, the next season, Manchester City didn't get out of the group of, finished last in the group, in fact, in the Champions League, and lost in the FA Cup final to Wigan. Mancini was dismissed the day after the Wigan loss. Manuel Pellegrini comes in, I think does a phenomenal job from where I sit. I think Pellegrini was so robust in the attacking tactics, and the first few months of the season didn't go well in the 13-14 season. But with the signing of Fernandinho, who to me is one of my all-time favorite Manchester City players, he was up there with the Mike Summerbys and the Franny Lees and so many others. Sean Goder for me is a big one, big one from Paul Dickoff. Those are the names that I revere. But anyway, Joe Corrigan. We could go on and on about that. But Fernandinho comes in and they have that solid holding midfield presence and a guy who can pass also as a six. And they are rampant. And Yaya Touré has the best season of his career. No manager ever used Touré the way Pellegrini did. And in fact, we know how poorly he was used at Barcelona by Guardiola. So I'm dubious about Pep coming in, quite frankly, in 2016. Okay, I know he's won in Spain. I know he's won in Germany. I know he's won in Europe. Can he win in the Premier League, and can he win with this specific squad that had been constructed by his predecessors and by the previous director of football, Brian Marwood, before Tishi Begiristan had come in, Pep's buddy? The keys, as it turns out, were the two signings in the summer of 2015 for the final year of Pellegrini, where City were finished fourth in the league and were not very good. And that was Kevin De Bruyne coming in from Wolfsburg, and Raheem Sterling, who was a known quantity, right? He had burned City when he had been at Liverpool, coming in from Liverpool. What Pep was able to do to transform Sterling to a level that people don't talk about. People have genuinely forgotten about Raheem Sterling, I guess, because of what's happened at Chelsea. But he was, in my estimation, the best English player. I'm not saying the best player in the league, but the best English player alongside Harry Kane. So one of the top two in that period from 2017 to about 2020. And that was the way he played as a wide player who could come inside, but also pressed high, understood his defensive responsibilities, understood his passing responsibilities in a Guardiola system. Turned Raheem Sterling into a beast. And that benefited England too, by the way, because Sterling and Kane had a telepathic understanding of each other for England. What he was able to do to transform Fernandinho even to a higher level was pretty remarkable. So the 17-18, 18-19 seasons are record-breaking. Summer 2017, Bernardo Silva is signed from Monaco. He had been a very good player for Monaco. They had gone deep in the Champions League the previous year. In fact, they beat Manchester City in the Champions League that year. We didn't really see it in the 17-18 season, the 100-point season, but in the 18-19 season, I would say along with Raheem Sterling, he was Manchester City's best player. Better than Aguero, better than David Silva, better than Kevin De Bruyne. And there is a two-way dimension of Bernardo Silva's game. He's creative. He can push wide. He has a little bit of nastiness in his game, which you didn't have from the likes of De Bruyne, David Silva, these kind of very classy, cerebral players. Bernardo Silva had a nastiness. He had a desire. He would fight. Even Ilkay Gundogan, classic City player, classic Dortmund player before that, key player for Germany, obviously through the generations that he played for the German national team, didn't have that. There was a certain nastiness, a grit to Bernardo Silva's game. And that has really carried Manchester City through the Pep years, with the exception of the 100-point season. He has been, I would say, along with Sterling, the key guy on that 18-19 team that got 98 points and just edged out Liverpool for the title. I would say the 2021 season where City were not able to produce goals in great numbers, but had to be very efficient, and they won the league. That was the COVID year, the year which was kind of, started late because of COVID, and City didn't start very well that season. That was down. Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan were the two best players on the team that season. 21-22 season, Silva, to me, Bernardo Silva, let's call him Bernardo. We don't confuse him with David Silva. Bernardo, best player in the Premier League. Full stop. I mean, Van Dijk was there too, but I think Bernardo. De Bruyne also. 22-23, 23-24. Such important parts of City seeing out the title. 23-24 season, just outlasting Arsenal at the end. And then you talk about all the cup triumphs, the FA Cup triumphs, the League Cup triumphs, the triumphs in Europe. By the way, I was reminded yesterday that the European Super Cup, who scored the goal for Manchester City to win the European Super Cup? It's actually Cole Palmer. So that's an aside. Cole Palmer's name is on everyone's lips. I'm gonna be talking a little bit more. I've written an article, obviously, at Beyond the 90 about the England school selection. I'm gonna be talking a little more about Tuchel and why I think he got it right. Increasingly, as the days go by, I think he got it right. But that's for another day. So Bernardo, unbelievable servant. Let's talk about, and Pep doesn't win all these titles without Bernardo. Let's talk about John Stones, because he's the first player that was signed by Pep, or by Bajiristan and Pep, after Pep came to Manchester City. He had shown at both Barnsley and at Barnsley, where he was playing right back, actually, and then at Everton, where he was used in kind of a both right back and center back by Roberto Martinez, how effective he could be. Now, because of his ball playing skills, Pep was able to transform him into a combo ball-playing center back and a guy who could step into midfield and play as an auxiliary six, which allowed the Fernandinhos, the Gundogans, the Bernardos to get further forward. Cover that space, really nice and tidy with the ball. Doesn't have the greatest pace, but when he was fit, it allowed Guardiola's tactics to evolve in a way, and especially when you combine it with the inverted fullback. So if you played Stones actually as a six, he could drop back as a center back. You have a three-man back line with whoever the other center backs were. Maybe it was Ruben Diaz, maybe it was Nathan Ake, whoever. At the beginning, it would have been Laporte, Otamendi, right? And then you invert the fullbacks inside. So Kyle Walker playing as an inverted fullback was Pep's great innovation of the 17-18 season. And that England took that to the World Cup and got to a semifinal playing Kyle Walker as an inverted fullback. And then everybody started to copy it, right? You even saw Trent, Alexander-Arnold. You saw Klopp copy it. You saw at times Thomas Tuchel copy it with Ben Chilwell and Reece James. So that tactic, which everybody gives Kyle Walker, who was just a beast, the best right back in the world at his apex. So much of that tactic was able to evolve because of John Stones' ability to play as a six, or to or to kind of create a three-man center back line, or to cover if he's playing center back with another center back pair, his instincts to play right back, and so that allowed Walker to do what he did. In terms of Pep, where does he rank all time? I think the consensus is Ferguson and him are 1 and 2. Sir Alex 1 and 2 in whatever order, in the Premier League era. Now, football did not begin in 1992, in spite of what the Premier League wants us to believe. So you have to consider Bob Paisley, I think, in this conversation, and Herbert Chapman, among maybe one or two others. Greatest managers in England. And obviously, they're all, those other managers I mentioned are all from the British Isles. Now, there's been a disproportionate number of great Scottish managers versus English managers through the years. Don't want to get into that debate, but of course, Paisley, unlike his mentor Shankly, was English. So maybe we say Paisley was the greatest English manager of all time in English league football. Where do I put Guardiola? Where do I put Pep versus Sir Alex? They're equal. I think obviously the tactical innovation, you give Guardiola the edge. The management, I give Ferguson the edge. The resourcefulness and scrappiness of their teams, they're right there. There were titles Man United should not have won. There were titles that Man United was not the best team in the Premier League. And they outlasted Arsenal, or they outlasted Chelsea, particularly the second coming of the great United teams. They outlasted really good Chelsea teams. There are a number of titles Manchester City do not win with another manager. So of the 6 titles that Manchester City won under Guardiola, how many of those titles did they win with another manager? Okay, 17-18, they had 100 points. They were better than everybody. They still win the title, maybe with 90 points with another manager. 18-19, no way. They don't win that title without Pep. 2021, no way. They don't win that title without Pep. Although I do know that the team that finished second that season that only had 74 points, but that team should not have won a title. That 2021 team. 21-22, I think Liverpool probably won the title that year. 22-23, 23-24, questionable, right? They outlasted Arsenal those 2 seasons, but I'm not sure Arsenal was ready to win a title. But I think certainly the 2 titles where they outlasted Liverpool, City does not win without Guardiola. How many of the titles does Ferguson win? Does Man United win without Ferguson? I don't think Man United wins the 06-07 title without Ferguson. I think Chelsea wins that year. 08-09, I think Liverpool wins that year. I think the earlier titles were mostly, there might have been one that maybe Arsenal would have won if Fergie hadn't been there. So they're equal. They're equal as far as I'm concerned. But a great era for Manchester City, a great era for English football is over. Does Manchester City take a step back now? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. Do they take a step back to where they're not a top 4 side? That I don't think. I think Maresca has enough in the tool shed to where they'll stay in the top 4, probably the top 3. Do they fall behind Manchester United next season for the first time? Manchester City has finished ahead of Manchester United for 13 successive seasons, which is the longest such streak like this. The previous streak was 7 or 8 years in the late 60s, early 70s when the Busby babes. I mean, it was the same thing. Busby fades out, Manchester City asserts their dominance locally. Ferguson fades out, Manchester City asserts their dominance locally. Just if you're just comparing the 2 Manchester Giants. I think next year United are possibly better than City. I don't want to be nailed down to say they are, but I do think there's a possibility City finish 3rd or 4th next year, and United are the team that pushes Arsenal. I mean, when I look at Arsenal's squad, they should win the title the next 2 or 3 seasons on the bounce. But we know it's never that simple. But yeah, incredible era comes to an end. And an era I enjoyed as a Manchester City supporter. I'm more distant from the club now than I was when this 10-year run, this 10-year decade of dominance, if we want to call it, started. It ends with a ignominious loss to Aston Villa yesterday, and Arsenal lifting the title. But yeah, era that defined English football. Great era.